She's sitting right across from you. The conversation has been going for 40 minutes, and somehow you're still talking about Netflix shows and weekend plans. You can feel it, that invisible ceiling. You want to go somewhere real with this person, but every time you reach for something deeper, the moment slips sideways and you're back to surface level again. You've done everything right. You showed up, you listened, you asked follow-up questions. But there's this gap between pleasant and genuine, between liked and truly known, and you cannot figure out how to cross it without it getting awkward or coming across as too intense. That gap has a name, and more importantly, it has a solution. Not a script, not a manipulation tactic. A genuine psychological understanding of how closeness actually forms between two people. And once you grasp it, every conversation you have changes. The first thing, nobody tells you about emotional closeness. Most conversations stay shallow, not because the people in them are shallow. They stay shallow because the environment never signals that depth is welcome. Picture two strangers in an elevator. They talk about the weather, not because they are both deeply interested in barometric pressure, but because the environment makes anything more personal feel intrusive. There's no established safety. And without safety, people default to what's universally acceptable, which means universally meaningless. The same dynamic happens on dates, at dinners, in every conversation where someone quietly wants to go deeper but can't find the on-ramp. The missing piece isn't a better question. It's a different kind of atmosphere, one where being real doesn't feel like a risk. Here's what most people completely overlook. Before a single meaningful question can land, the conversational contract between two people has to change. That contract, the unspoken agreement about what kind of exchange this is going to be, gets set in the first few minutes. If it gets set as casual small talk, you're going to have to actively reset it to get somewhere worth going. The way you reset it isn't by asking something heavy. It's by being the first one to be slightly real. Not dramatically vulnerable, just honest in a way that most people aren't in polite conversation. Something like, I've noticed I can talk to someone for an hour and still feel like I don't actually know them. That's a strange feeling. You're not putting anything on her. You're just showing that you're the kind of person who notices real things and says them out loud. That single shift signals to her nervous system. This person is safe to be honest with. The room just changed. Now she's curious. Now she's paying attention differently. And now the questions you're about to ask will land in completely different soil. What you actually do. Before you ask anything that matters, make one small, honest observation about yourself, the moment, or the nature of connection itself. You're not confessing anything dramatic. You're just showing her that real is an option here. Why questions fail. The threat response. Nobody talks about. Every single question you ask, another person goes through an invisible filter in their brain before they answer it. It happens in milliseconds. The filter is running one basic calculation. Is answering this going to cost me something? If the answer might expose them to judgment, if they suspect you're going to use what they say to evaluate whether they're worth your time, they'll give you a protected answer, polished, safe, rehearsed. You'll think you learned something about her. You didn't. You got a curated version of her, and she walked away feeling vaguely unseen without knowing exactly why. This is the fundamental problem with most deep conversation approaches. The questions are technically meaningful, but they're delivered in an environment that still feels evaluative. She can feel the agenda underneath the question. She can feel that your interest has conditions attached. Contrast that with the experience of talking to someone who is radically non-judgmental, someone who listens to whatever you say and responds with genuine curiosity instead of a verdict. Suddenly you find yourself saying things you haven't said out loud before, not because they asked the perfect question, but because the absence of judgment made the truth feel safe to speak, worth sitting with for a second. The most intimate conversations you've ever had in your life probably happened not because someone asked the perfect question, but because you somehow knew in the bones of you that whatever you said was going to be received without criticism. That is the environment you're trying to create, and you create it through your reactions as much as your questions. When she says something unexpected, your face shouldn't flash evaluation. It should flash recognition. Like you find it fascinating that she said that, because genuinely curious people don't judge. They want to understand what you actually do. When she answers something honestly, resist the reflex to immediately respond with your own opinion or a comparable story. First, say something that shows you heard the emotional content, not just the information. That's actually a really honest thing to say, goes further than you'd imagine. The ladder that nobody climbs correctly. Emotional closeness doesn't jump levels. It moves through them, one at a time, and each level requires the one below it to be solid first. Think of it as a progression with 4 distinct stages. The first stage is shared observation, the lightest possible connection. You both notice the same thing. The place has a strange vibe tonight. The song playing doesn't match the mood at all. You're in the same sensory world for a moment, and you both acknowledge it. This sounds trivially small, but it does something important. It establishes that you are both present in the same reality right now. It's alignment at the most basic level, and alignment is the foundation everything else gets built on. The second stage is preference and memory. Is there somewhere you went, even just once, that you keep thinking about for reasons you can't fully explain? Now you're inviting her to access something real. She has to reach into her actual experience to answer that. The answer she gives you won't be rehearsed because the question itself isn't one she's been asked before. The third stage is meaning and values. What things actually stand for to her beneath the surface? What's something you used to want that you realized wasn't actually about the thing itself? This question requires self-reflection. And people who are invited to reflect on their own experience in the presence of someone who actually wants to hear the answer feel something close to being genuinely known. The fourth stage, which you don't rush toward and which only appears after real trust has formed, is longing and fear. What she wants most and is somehow also most frightened of. This is the territory where two people either have a conversation they will remember for years or never quite get to at all. Here's where most men go wrong. They try to access stage 4 in the first 30 minutes. They skip the ladder because they're impatient for closeness. And she can feel the pressure of that skipping. It doesn't register as depth. It registers as an agenda, and agendas close people down. What you actually do, run every stage before you climb to the next. Be genuinely interested in what she says at stage 1, because your interest, not your questions, is the actual engine of intimacy. 3 questions that actually open people up. Not all questions do the same thing. Some collect information, some prompt performance, some, a specific category, create a particular kind of closeness that feels natural and easy, even though what you're discussing is genuinely personal. Call them opening questions. They share 3 characteristics. They invite her to reflect on real experience. They have no right or wrong answer, so she's not being evaluated. And they create a natural space for you to share something real in return, making the exchange mutual rather than one-sided. Here's the first one. Is there something you used to care a lot about that sort of quietly disappeared, and you're not sure whether you miss it or whether you've just grown past it? Nearly everyone has an answer to this. It could be a creative pursuit, a friendship, a version of themselves they left behind. And the fact that the question acknowledges uncertainty, you're not sure, removes any pressure to have it figured out. She can just be honest. The second one. Do you think the life you're actually living and the life that would feel most like you are the same thing right now? This one is slightly brave to ask because it's slightly brave to answer. It invites genuine reflection on the gap between reality and desire, which is a deeply human experience. And because you ask something brave, the implicit invitation is for her to be brave in return. The third one. What's something that took you a long time to stop apologizing for? This question is remarkable because the answer almost always reveals something core about who she actually is. The things people have had to stop apologizing for are the things that felt least acceptable about them, which means they're often the most real and most interesting things about them. Notice what all three of these have in common. They're not fishing for biographical data. They're inviting an emotional experience, and the experience of being genuinely asked and genuinely heard is what creates intimacy, not the exchange of facts about someone's life. What you actually do, use one of these in your next real conversation. Don't announce it as a deep question. Just let it emerge, naturally from whatever you're already talking about. The seamless introduction of something real is more powerful than a dramatic pivot to it. The receiving problem. Why listening wrong? Kills everything you could ask every single one of these questions flawlessly and still walk away with nothing. Because the question is only half of it. What you do with the answer is the other half. And most people do it wrong without realizing. When someone shares something real, there are three common responses that quietly shut intimacy down. The first is the relatability hijack. Oh my God, same thing happened to me. And then the conversation is about you. Her moment of honesty gets used as a launching pad for your story. And she registers, not consciously but clearly, that what she said wasn't actually received. It was just a transition. The second is the fix reflex. Have you tried just letting go of that? Someone shares something vulnerable and you offer a solution. The intention is kind, but the effect is that you've turned her emotional truth into a problem to be managed. She doesn't feel understood. She feels handled. The third is the minimizer. I'm sure it'll be fine, gentle, reassuring, and completely deflating, because you just fast-forwarded past the part where she was being honest and rushed to the resolution. What she shared didn't get to exist for even a moment. All three of these communicate at the nervous system level. This isn't quite safe enough for me to hold what you just offered. And she pulls back. Not because she doesn't trust you, because the container wasn't strong enough. Attunement, the experience of being genuinely met, looks different from all three of these. It looks like sitting with what she said for an actual moment. Reflecting back the emotional weight of it, not the factual content. It's strange, isn't it? When you lose something and can't quite identify the moment it left. That response says, I heard not just what you said, but what it meant that you said it. What you actually do. After she shares something real, pause before you respond. 2 seconds. Let the silence communicate that you're processing, not queuing up your next line. Then reflect back the feeling underneath the words, not the information on top of them. The mirror effect, the psychology behind instant connection. There's a phenomenon that explains why some people make you feel deeply comfortable within minutes of meeting them. It's not their looks or their status or their social confidence. It's something more precise than any of that. These people mirror emotional register, not mimicry, not copying body language or repeating words. Something subtler. They're operating at whatever emotional frequency the conversation is capable of, and they're demonstrating, through their own openness, that this level is safe to inhabit. When someone is being light and playful, they're playful. When the conversation tilts toward it's something real, they tilt towards something real first. They don't wait for permission. They model the behavior that makes depth feel natural. And the other person's brain runs an unconscious recognition. This person is on the same wavelength as me. That recognition is what people describe as instant connection. It's not chemistry in the mysterious sense. It's attunement in the neurological sense. The practical implication of this is significant. If you want a conversation to go somewhere real, you don't push it there by asking a deeper question. You take it there by sharing something a layer deeper yourself. Something I've been sitting with lately. How rarely anyone actually says what they want, even to themselves. like we're all fluent in the language of what we're supposed to want. Now, the register of the conversation has shifted. You moved it. And she can choose to meet you there. That is the closest thing to a genuine psychological insight in this entire space. It's not manipulation, it's modeling. You can't demand intimacy from someone, but you can demonstrate that it's available here, right now, in this conversation, and let her decide whether to step into it. What you actually do, stop waiting for her to set the emotional depth of the conversation. You set it. One authentic share at a time. If she matches it, the connection is real. If she doesn't, that tells you something equally useful. The only thing that actually makes any of this work. There's a version of everything covered in this piece that becomes completely hollow, and it happens the moment you start treating it as technique. The ladder, the opening questions, the mirror effect, the attunement practice. All of it works when it comes from one source and only one source. Genuine curiosity about another person's inner world. Not strategic curiosity. Not curiosity designed to manufacture an outcome. The real kind, where you actually want to know the answer. Where you find other people's experiences genuinely interesting. Where the conversation isn't something you're managing, but something you're inside of. Here's the part worth returning to. The most magnetically attractive quality a person can have in conversation is not confidence, not humor, not charm. It's full, unchoreographed attention, the feeling of being in this moment, the most interesting thing in someone else's world. People rarely experience that. When they do, they don't forget it. You cannot fake it. You can simulate it for a few minutes, but the microsignals will betray you. The slight vacancy when she says something you weren't expecting, the too quick recovery, the subtle sense that you're managing rather than participating. She'll feel it, not name it, and the connection will stay cordoned off behind glass. The real practice, the one that changes not just this conversation, but every conversation, is working on your own genuine interest in people, reading broadly, thinking carefully. Asking yourself honest questions so you know how to ask them of others. Becoming someone who finds human experience interesting because you've spent time with your own. Go into the next conversation without an agenda. Be curious without needing the curiosity to produce anything. Ask one question you actually want the answer to. Receive the answer like it matters, because it does. Offer one honest thing about yourself in return. That's not a tactic, that's a conversation. And somewhere inside a conversation something starts to open up that no strategy in the world could have manufactured. That's where closeness actually lives. And you can be there tonight if you're willing to show up without a script.